Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Nigel Lamb from the CXO Circle, and I'll be moderating today's session on AI and smart manufacturing. If this is your first time engaging with the CXO Circle, we're really glad to have you with us. We're a private invite-only community made up of senior leaders across technology, operations, and enterprise transformation. Our focus is on bringing together decision makers from the CIOs and CTOs to the heads of AI and digital through carefully curated events, dinners and peer conversations that go deeper than what you usually hear on stage or in webinars. What sets the CXO Circle apart is that we're here for real practitioner-led dialogue. We're not chasing headlines, we're focusing on what's actually happening on the ground, what's working, and where the gaps still are. So if today resonates with you and you'd like to join a future event, speak on a panel, or simply stay connected, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@thecxocircle.com or visit us on the main website at thecxocircle.com. Now let's talk about why we're here today. There's a lot of buzz around AI. Most companies are under pressure to do something with it, to automate faster, to act smarter, to stay competitive. But many of us still are asking the core questions. What exactly should we build? How do we get started? And how do we scale reasonably without overcomplicating it? Nowhere are those questions more relevant than in manufacturing. This is where legacy systems, operational risk, and real-time decision-making collide. And while the potential of AI in this space is massive, the reality of implementation is far more straightforward. That's why today's session is dedicated to AI and smart manufacturing. We've brought together a panel of leaders who are shaping the space from very different angles, from global energy, pharmaceuticals, aviation, the public sector, and AI governance. Let me introduce some of them quickly before we dive in. Maria, Head of PMO Artificial Intelligence at International Airlines Group, who's heading AI strategy and delivery across complex global environments. Girish, General Manager at Shell, with deep expertise in technology, energy transformation, and enterprise transformation. There's Pravin, Head of Process Digitization at Ofgem and an advisory board member at the CXO Circle, bringing 20+ years of leadership in public service innovation and data-driven automation. And then there's KK, our keynote speaker today, a globally expert and data and AI. He's the former CDO at Haligon and Fairfetch, and currently the founder at DataHat AI, advising global boards and executive teams on how to lead and scale Gen AI and enterprise AI initiatives. So let's get into it. Today's panel discussion is roughly 28 minutes. And let's start with the first question. Getting started with AI. A lot of teams want to use AI, but the hardest part is often just knowing where to begin. What gets buy-in and what makes a first move successful? Shall we ask Pravin first? Can you kick us off with your first practical user case, what your first practical user case looked like?
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks for the question. And the first question, or the first step in the journey of artificial intelligence or implementing any kind of AI-enabled solution is to pick the smallest and tiniest use case. So I also did the same thing. We identified very simple use case, which is, we built a what you call it, the conversational AI chatbot for HR related, basic queries like, I want to have, employment verification letter or onboarding process, right? Which are basically data entering from one form to another form, which is quite tedious, manual, and and does not require any cognitive skills or human intelligence, right? It should be or it must be automated. So we used one of the IBM-based platform to automate this process, and it was very simple process, and it freed up a lot of time from HR and people centers perspective, but also it created a very positive impact amongst the employee. Like somebody is applying for a property for mortgage, or they are applying for moving into the new property, and for the rental lease agreement they need an employment verification letter, which can be generated from a self-service automated ticketing system, right? So it should not go to HR and some person is looking into it and everything is there, should be automated, and we did manage to automate. So the value of implementing any new technology, including artificial intelligence or AI, is identifying the right use cases first. Because you know that since the ChatGPT launched in somewhere around end of 2022, everybody is so excited, and everybody wants to have something from AI, or they want to have AI in their organization, right? Because everybody wants to gain some kind of productivity improvement or process improvement through AI. So we should not kill the excitement and thrill by picking up the extremely complex use case, and then people will lose interest. So, and also very cautious note, the proof of concept is not equal to the proof of success. So picking up the right proof of concept is good, but eventually you have to pick the right business use case which generate the real value to the organization.
Right. Fantastic. And maybe one of you could answer the next question. What helped overcome early doubts or misperceptions about cost and complexity? Maria?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe Nigel, I'll take that one.
Yes.
Girish here. I'll maybe give the audience a very simple 4-step framework, which is always useful to kind of follow. Yeah, it's something which I've kind of practiced. The first is always, I call it, you have to just, as top management, just energize your employees and your organization about what this is, right? I mean, till you hear it, like an anecdotally said from the horse's mouth, it will seem as just another fad, something which is happening on the byline somewhere on the sidelines, right? So I keep saying you have to have the top management feel energetic and optimistic about any new technology innovation, and that is absolutely the first step. The second is really around continuous engagement. So it's not just stating it one off, but whether it's through written communication, through town halls, through memos, just a constant reminder that this is not another passing, trend or a fad. This is something we genuinely want everyone to learn, understand, and then practice, right? So I think energizing the organization and engaging. Following that, there has to be some sort of training or education, right? I mean, because without that, you're expecting someone to perform without giving them the necessary basic training to say, here is the parameters within which you can operate, right? I mean, without that, it becomes quite open-ended. And following that is really empowering them with tools, right? I mean, it's like sending someone on a mission without empowering them with the right tools. So and as an example, we created like a little AI environment, like an ecosystem where both like practitioners and others have a little custom development environment where they don't have to worry about whether we are working with a particular provider. Behind the scenes, we could work with multiple AI companies, but we want to abstract some of this from the average employee to really say, here are the tools, here is the environment, here is the training. Now you figure out what this means to you, to your context, to your job, to your function. So I think in that order, in terms of really energizing, engaging, empowering, and educating, I think really helped set the tone. And the questions around ROI, cost impact, I think this is a lesson which I personally have learned. A company like Amazon follow. They abstract those things completely from the average employee, right? Those are concerns of a bunch of people. Let people focus on what is important to you at your scale. You can't expect an analyst graduate worrying about return on capital employed. I mean, it's okay for him to know it, but that's not what we want him or her to do. Yeah. So I think those are a few things from my journey across both my consulting career as well as in corporates. I think is a common thread and theme. It's really kind of sets the tone for any sort of transformation-led journey. So yeah, I mean, they're just practical four kind of, I know steps I would say which any organization at any level I think need to take, and the discipline to continue to do this I think is the hard bit, right? So that's probably what I would do in any circumstance. Yeah,
That's fantastic. That's a great answer. So let's go to the next question. Basically framed around what needs to be in place before scaling AI. What really needs to be ready? Data, people, governance, systems. Maria, this is a question for you. From IAG's side, how did you prepare the organization to take this on?
Thank you, Nigel. I just need to do a quick disclaimer first, that the views and opinions I'll be sharing today are my own and do not necessarily represent those of my employer or any organization I'm affiliated with. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So now back to the question. So I would say in ideal world, before starting to implement and scale AI, there are several key capabilities that organization needs to have in place. You need to have your well-defined AI strategy that aligns with the overarching business objectives. You need to have your executive sponsorship and stakeholders buy-in. You need to have your organizational structure, your solid data infrastructure and governance framework, ethical and compliance framework, and your systems needs to be scalable as well. With that said, when we started the AI journey in IAG a couple of years ago, we didn't have everything perfectly in place. What we had was a clear AI strategy, executive sponsorship, and a lot of enthusiasm to be able to dive in. And we've been working hard for the past couple of years to bring, the other necessary elements I just mentioned, to bring them together, so we can progress successfully. And I'm aligned with what was said a little bit earlier, and that's as well one of my advice to companies that are just starting their AI journey today. Don't wait for everything to be perfect. Technology evolves at such a rapid pace that trying to get everything right from the start just can hold you back. So it's better to focus on a specific use case and to deliver tangible, immediate value. Like start small, measure impact, and scale from there.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks, Maria. And Hassan, this is one for you. What did your foundational capability look like, and how did it evolve?
It's just building up on what Maria said and Jerish said as well. It's about people and process and technology, and the intersection of those three essentially. So we've seen machine learning and AI go from very niche sort of areas where different business units were looking at them at it and applying it in very niche sort of ways, optimizing production or optimizing supply chains too. And now with AI, it's a complete paradigm shift in thinking. Right now we're rethinking businesses essentially. So all of that has happened kind of organically. Wherever it has been successful, it has happened organically, where business leaders themselves, they might not be technical leaders, but they understand their business. They've been looking at technology and they've been deciding how much of it do they need integrated in their processes. And then obviously, we have central sort of governance structures where we say this is safe and something else is not safe yet. And a combination of all of those things, they make the correct foundations.
Fantastic. No, that's great. And let's go to the next main question, which is what didn't go to plan? No rollout is perfect. What were the unexpected blockers or lessons? Let's go back to Maria for this one. What friction points surprised you, organizationally or technically?
Yeah, well, I have to say we had quite a long list of those. Yeah, with regards to challenges and blockers, I think pretty much every big, large organization that has tried to implement artificial intelligence has come across challenges around, their data, security, regulations, legacy systems, risk and ethical considerations, which are quite a hot topic at the moment in the AI space. But couple of challenges that we weren't that much prepared for. While these around data and legacy systems, we knew that are complicated, and we had them in our plans to see how we can tackle them. What we weren't prepared was the shortage of skilled AI workers that we can immediately hire.
Right.
We wanted to grow our AI department quite quickly, and we wanted to grow it fast. And when we went to the market, there was simply not enough skilled employees available, or at least not at the mass scale we wanted to recruit. So that was one of our blockers. And obviously, we knew we want to invest in our current employees, but getting them trained and upskilled easily takes between 3 to 6 months. And, we are looking easily for at least a year if you want to bring them to expert level. Yeah, and another challenge, which was quite unexpected for us, was as well around how hard was to estimate the return on investment for AI initiatives, especially when AI was bringing indirectly cost savings, so is improving resilience, or something else. Is just very, very hard to quantify the ROI on AI initiatives.
Fantastic. That's really interesting, because I've heard a lot of that from other people about trying to sort of build up their teams and getting the right team behind you as such. It's very difficult nowadays to scale up. Right, Pravin, question for you. What did you have to unlearn or rethink in those early stages?
Thanks, Nigel. So this is a really good question. So in terms of unlearn is, again, the start slow and start small, right? Before you start running, you need to start learning to walk. And in any organization, the quality of AI or the AI enabled solution is as good as the quality of the data or the availability of the data, right? So if the data availability and data quality is not good, you cannot build good AI on the fragmented data or the data in silos. So lots of standardization, data quality, or streamlining the processes and data before data, right, had to be done by myself and many of my team members in my last organization. So addressing the data quality issues and the data governance, right? So in my last organization, when I started talking about the data governance, that was very new concept a couple of years back, right? So what is that data governance? So having a comprehensive data governance framework in place, fixing the data quality related issues before start implementing AI on the top of what you call it, the bad quality data. It created a lot of mess. Like we managed to automate and improve the productivity using AI enabled solution, but it was actually catering or addressing only the 20% of the happy path scenario of process. 80% which were exception or the variation that was not catering. Then we realized, okay, let's sit down, let's take a step back, let's streamline processes and data first before we implement any kind of nice tool, technology, or AI on top of it.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that was really interesting. Right, so let's go to our next question and theme, making the case for AI. How did you justify investment in AI to the business? Very important factor. KK, this is a question for you. How did you frame ROI beyond cost savings, especially early on?
I think that's a brilliant question. What happens often is when you first go try to make a case, we do often start with trying to make cost savings the way that we're going to make an ROI case. But as Maria brilliantly said earlier, right, it's really hard to figure out what savings did you actually get from that very specific thing that you did here, right? It's a multivariate problem. There are many different variables happening at the same time. How do I prove that my AI machine learning actually caused that improvement, right? So, and also it's a negative way of looking at it. It's looking like you're cutting things and therefore you're saving money. Instead of that, what I found works much better right from the beginning. I was in Silicon Valley at that time working with a lot of the telecom players in the US, we had a choice. You could either reduce their cost or you could increase their top line, right? You could increase customer retention, you could increase revenue, you could increase things that everybody wants to see increasing, right? And so I said, yes, sure, we will do the automation, we will do the efficiency gains, etc. Sure. But the real place where you can make a difference is to look at the top line and see how you can grow the business. How can you make your customers happier? And so I've always, right from that time onwards, I've remembered there are two sides to it. Yes, we will do the cost savings. Yes, we will do the efficiency, but let's focus on improving business.
Fantastic. No, that's really good. Okay, Girish, and this is for you. Question: what metrics or narratives helped you drive buy-in?
Sure, but like Maria, just again disclaimer. I mean, this is all personal views and not representative of the company. But I think from my experience, I think it's kind of an extension of what KK was referring to. If you really go back for any business investment decision, every company will always have a scorecard, right? Which the management, top management held accountable to. Some publicly listed, which I think are pretty obvious in terms of shareholder returns, etc., or even privately held. But take three which generally are non-disputable, right? You've got a core financial goal, you've got generally an operational goal, and you've got something around customer centricity. Yeah. And if I take these three, financials, depending on the model, you can focus on top line growth, where you think that the fundamental product or service will differentiate in the market and help you capture market share, create different competitive advantage and so on. I think the whole OpEx, cost savings, productivity, speed, accuracy is quite instinctively better understood. I mean, in this realm, because we see that, hey, my productivity gain is from 6 weeks down to 2, or 2 weeks down to an hour. So one, I think linking it to what cannot be questioned is the first, right? So this is one category. I mean, take operational. I mean, in our instance, safety is absolutely paramount in a very physical manufacturing, field-driven environment. And enough of these technologies have demonstrated, whether it's through simple things like sensors, simple things like IoT, simple things like robotic manufacturing, it's not just about the productivity gains. I mean, it drives human safety or operational safety to a completely different level. And it is something which is perhaps a lot more relevant to this topic in the manufacturing and kind of operational space than to many others. So I think that will be the second. And third, like KK said, there has to be something around what it does to the end customer. Yeah. I mean, if you're a product company or a service company, end of the day is B2B or B2C, then there are 4 classifications of what your business is in. We have, for example, something all very simple, a CSI, right? A customer satisfaction index. And if you're not measuring it, put a measure in place. If you already have a measure in place, use these tools and techniques to first ensure that it's representative of not 1%, 2% of the population, but 50, 60, 70%, right? So even applying some of these technologies simply to say, I can now reach out to 60, 80% of my customers to just listen and understand, am I genuinely giving you what you expect in terms of price, quality, service? I just think these three, I think would apply to 95% organizations. Okay, if it's a nonprofit, maybe it's a little different, but beyond that, I think a basic financial operational customer, I think, is again a very simple 3-step framework. If you take a little step back, ask some questions, there has to be applicability in one of these three.
No, that's fantastic. That's really good. Okay, let's go to the next big question. Where is AI delivering value? Very, very important. Where has AI created real measurable value in your operations? Let's go back to Hassan. What's an example where AI made a clear difference?
So we've seen various different places across the industry, sometimes unexpected places as well. If you take the example of manufacturing, we thought that it's going to be, the optimization aspect where we'll be able to reduce waste, increase our yield. Turned out we ended up utilizing machine learning methods to inform our product early on from lessons learned in manufacturing. So it's always very applicable to places where there are lots and lots of variables. The data can be far and few in terms of examples. Sometimes you have these fat data frames where you have many variables, but in terms of examples, you don't have very many. Then it's things like imaging technology, where for quality control within manufacturing, we had samples. You had to take out a few, test them with various different testing methods, and now what you do is you put a camera. That camera is connected to a system with neural networks in it. And those neural networks, they identify any irregularities in your product. So you're essentially testing all of your product, which makes it safer and cheaper and faster as well. So these are some of the examples around manufacturing where we've seen a lot of value.
Now that's really interesting, because that actually came up in the original conference at the Gherkin, and it was partly covered over there by one of our colleagues in the CXO circle. Okay, so the next question after that goes to KK. Was there an unexpected area where value emerged?
Yeah, I think if you, how the question is not was there, I think there are so many. I'll give you a couple of examples. I think the first thing I learned was go for the simple stuff first. So as an example, won't name names, but a certain company I was with was doing a lot of articles written by hand. And we had customers all around the world, right? And if we've got consumer goods companies here, we've got companies which manufacture stuff that need to be sent to different countries and have to be written in different languages, etc. And this all used to be done by hand, right? And the simplest thing to do was to actually train or fine-tune some LLMs, right? Large language models. The answer is in that name itself, right? They are language models. So if you can fine-tune these, we found in multiple cases, in one case, we didn't have to actually translate articles by hand. We just could do it and give it enough context so that it made it take the intention and the feeling with it, and then have a human actually look at it. And what that did was the humans then went off and started writing real articles, which were something that the machine just couldn't think of by itself, right? So the advantage came surprisingly there. The more exciting part, which was not so simple, was in what I call cognitive mining. What do I mean by that? If you think about manufacturing, we have people on the shop floors. We have people who actually do certain things certain ways, and they do it every time. It almost becomes, intuitive. It's something that they just do. And what happens is they'll set settings in machines at a certain level, which is within the range of what it is supposed to do, but they always set it at a certain level. And once you keep track of what's actually happening with them and you look at it afterwards and you start seeing the patterns, you start realizing, oh, that human is actually really intelligent. The reason why they're putting it at that level is because that's the best level to actually put it at. It isn't that whole range, it is that point. And so collecting all of this data and actually trying to understand how humans work behind the scenes. I think Girish or Praveen, somebody mentioned early on that the data is really critical. Good data leads to better AI. And a lot of this data is often data that we don't look at. So the surprising part for us was actually go and look at those things that we don't always look at and understand what are the nuggets of gold that it's giving us.
Excellent, brilliant. Now that's really interesting. Great. So let's go to the next big core question, which is AI for sustainability and compliance. As sustainability is becoming non-negotiable, is AI supporting this mission? Maria, this goes back to you. How is this playing out in aviation, traceability, efficiency, and compliance?
Oh, thank you, Nigel. I love this question. As my organization is really big on sustainability. IG is the first airline group globally to commit to net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. I would say
Great.
that's quite impressive, yeah. And our strategy includes fleet modernization, increased use of sustainable aviation fuel, carbon offset emission, and supplier engagement as well. And I can give like a few specific examples. We use AI tools to optimize flight operations. For instance, machine learning models provide pilots with real-time weather forecast, air traffic, and aircraft performance, enabling more efficient rerouting and fuel usages, therefore, reducing carbon emission. We are working on AI tool that will allow us to better forecast fuel demand and assess the environmental impact on sustainable aviation fuel usage.
Right.
And we are working on AI tools that detect patterns in aircraft sensors data to predict part. Oh my, I'm not sure what's happening with me. I start like wobbling a little bit. I'm just getting so excited because all of these are like, I'm seeing things growing in between my fingers. They're so exciting, and that's why maybe I'm getting so excited about this. Like big problems, which before, in a way, we would spend years in, trying to figure out how to solve. Now it just takes us a few months, right? So that's why I'm getting a little bit more excited about when I speak about real examples. We are looking at, how different large language models can help us, improve our efficiency, offset carbon emission. We are using sustainable aviation fuel and so on. Yeah.
And do you is it also involved in things like predictive maintenance for the planes, etc.?
Absolutely, yeah, we do that as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Okay, so the next question on that level goes to Girish. What role is AI playing in ESG at Shell?
All right, I'll maybe take 3 examples which have probably covered different dimensions or aspects of this whole ESG space, given it's quite broad. So first, our commitment into building a renewable energy kind of business in itself, which obviously moves away from so-called traditional forms of energy to cleaner sources like wind, solar, etc. Now, to build these businesses, as we know, the basic premise is the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, and hence the need to really understand how using technology, vast amounts of historical data, all kinds of unpredictable variables which drive these, is to optimize between when can we really capture when the wind blows and the sun shines, and when it doesn't, really blend those together. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's what we call as the future of the energy mix. So that's a first example. The second, we have existing, CO2 emissions, etc. But there are technologies we have invested in, which a lot of companies are building, which takes the existing carbon dioxide monoxide and puts it deep under the ground. So it's called carbon capture and storage. So that again is an expensive affair, which obviously is not everyone is able to invest in, but those who are, if we can help drive the whole process and improvement in doing this over a period of time, it gradually takes away a lot of the existing kind of CO2 emissions, etc., and finds a way to kind of drive circularity in some ways. So that's kind of the second. The last, I think we've also been experimenting with what we call as lower carbon intensive fuels. So you've got conventional fuels, but whether it's aviation or other industry like Maria may know. So we're trying to do innovation in new material sciences, etc. But say, can we reduce 1% at a time in terms of the actual carbon intensity? Because we all know that we're not going to suddenly make planes electric. Maybe it'll be pretty soon, but for a foreseeable future, why we still need conventional aviation fuel? But you can drive what we call as material science, better processes to produce slightly lower carbon intensive. So those probably are 3 different examples of dimensions, which all you can visualize that with the advancements of AI, machine learning, more ability to capture trillions of data points, synthesize and drive improvements, can really drive the overall, I think, ESG agenda, both for our industry and for all our partner industries.
No, that's fantastic. No, that's really interesting. Great. Let's get on to the next big question. If you could start over, if you could do it all again, what would you change? KK, what's one thing that you do differently or start sooner?
One thing that I learned by experience was that data, AI, success in these is actually a people problem. And I would have, later on today, now what I do is whenever I start these things, I have what I call tribal calls or community calls, right? We'll go out and talk to people, not just the people who are in data and AI, not just the stakeholders, but the people who are actually going to work with it every day, right, across the company. My last company was 24,000 people, so it was very hard to actually go talk to everybody. So I would have done those kinds of things earlier, which is set up these events, get the people to actually get involved, see the benefits. They don't have to necessarily understand how the AI works. What they have to understand is, what do they want to get done with that AI? How can they do it responsibly? How can the company benefit? So I would start earlier with the people problem, solving the people problem.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Hassan, same for you. What's a lesson you'd pass on?
I think in addition to what KK said, the people problem kind of leads to a data problem as well. There's a primary use. This is something that I used to explain it to quite a lot of people internally, that there's a primary use of data. You create a data point, you make a decision right there and then you discard that data point. And then there's a secondary use where you can reuse that data in a slightly larger picture, and tertiary use, and so on and so forth. I think when you solve the people problem and people take ownership of the data, they tend to keep it in different ways, in cleaner ways. And I think having those data foundations is something that I would, if I were to go back, I would use that as a metric in choosing where I'd work. So data foundations are extremely important as well.
Fantastic. That's great. Right. And really, the final round is all about advice for today's manufacturing leaders from all of you. A quick closing round. If anyone in manufacturing is just starting their AI journey, what's one key piece of advice you'd offer? Maria, let's begin with you and move across the panel. Each speaker, if we can keep it to about 30 to 40 seconds only.
No, absolutely. I think it's easy, build strong data foundations, because AI is only as good as the data it learns from.
Fantastic. Great. And next person, Praveen.
Absolutely. So I would suggest, also don't forget the human-centric change management. So actively involving all the employees, organization. AI is not only for the IT people or some developer sitting in the IT desk and they are building some solution. Involved everybody. So they all should feel part of this journey, this transformational change or technology, and also address the fear of job displacement through AI. So that's the job of the everybody in organization, that especially the leaders, that AI is going to help you. AI is your extended arms to help you to get rid of the work which is quite monotonous, repeated, rule-based, does not require cognitive skills, intelligence, or imagination or thinking. Let the mechanical robotic work to be done by the robot or the software robots, which we call it sometimes automation, or the AI powered tool. You do the work which make you more human. That's it.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. And Girish, have you got some thoughts?
Yeah, I would say pick up a problem which nobody can challenge or refute and start with that. Because I always feel that when people are constantly questioning whether something is actually a problem and hence applying cutting edge innovative technologies to solve it, you haven't even validated that it's genuinely a problem. So, and always in organizations, you find some agree, some with others agree, pick something which no one can disagree and crack on with that.
Fantastic. That's great. And also, Hassan, have you got any thoughts?
I mean, great points, everybody. I would, just say that it has helped me look for inspiration in other industries. So, in manufacturing, I've seen that there was a lot of stuff that was happening elsewhere, imaging, for example. And it's always cool to look for inspiration in other industries and then have a think about, how that applies to you. That sometimes clears out a whole bunch of misconceptions about the technology and eases off people as well.
Okay, fantastic. And KK, have you got a quick roundup on that?
Absolutely. I think my piece of advice would be avoid the shiny thing syndrome. And what I mean by that is, if you just think about AI and the way it's been changing, just look back 2.5 years, right? Before November 2022, we didn't even know what generative AI was. And look how far we've come in 2.5 years. But what happens with this is there are always things that are coming up. Today it's MCP, tomorrow it'll be something else. We are all looking at this newest thing and wondering, oh, should I go after that? Right. And the important thing is what several of my panelists said before, which is find what real business problem we're trying to solve. Once we know that business problem, find the right technology that we can apply to it from that AI world. We're lucky we have so many options. Don't chase the shiny thing. Chase the thing that solves that business problem.
No, that's fantastic. That's great. Well, thanks, everyone. That was a brilliant panel session, and thanks for your great insights. I think we've hopefully everyone who's watching has actually learned something from this. And now let's bring it all together. I'm excited to hand over to KK. He's the founder of DataHat AI and has helped shape AI strategy at board level across consumer, retail, fashion, and the healthcare sectors. In his keynote, he'll take us through the big picture, how to scale AI responsibly, safely, and with the real impact in complex organization. KK, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. I figured I would just put a really small presentation together. Can you guys see my screen now, I'm assuming? And I thought I would change the topic slightly based on the questions that you asked, Nigel. So I figured let's talk about how do you actually go from experiments to production. We're all doing experiments with AI, Gen AI in the smart manufacturing space. So how do we do that? Just to put the table stakes down, of course, AI is central to Industry 4.0, right? Those who embrace AI will absolutely outpace those that don't if you do it right. What that means is manufacturing transformations need good AI. And several of my panelists said this before me, which is good AI needs good data. How do you actually start with good data, though? How do you start with those foundations? How do you make sure they're going to give you what you need? I'll tell you what works for me. And this is hot off the press. This is exactly what I do when I go in to talk to a company. I start with the enterprise data assets. So if you see, I'm going to try and get my laser pointer going. And if you see the enterprise data assets that are the foundations across the company, understanding those today takes a lot of time and effort. Really, even if you have the assets together, what are the relations between them? Is it a causal relationship? Is it a correlation rather than a causality? Well, what we found is that agents actually are very good at understanding some of those things. It's not a simple problem to solve. It's a hard problem to solve. But once you do solve it, and you can actually store that data so that people can use it beyond just those enterprise assets, not just the assets, how do you actually use those assets? And you store them in a form that can then allow your people to ask questions of it, right? So you can actually have an LLM that talks not just to a regular RAG, which I'm assuming most of you are familiar with, but with a RAG that is made with this specific enhanced data coming from your enterprise data assets. Using that and then tying in multi-agent automation, right? Automation is going to happen. Pick those areas where you're going to attack it, and then use this data and this knowledge to attack it. And then, of course, that creates new data. which modifies your enterprise data assets. So I think the bottom line is very simple. Understand the data, get it working, and then iterate. Now, talking specifically about smart manufacturing, what I found is smart manufacturing, of course, from a definition perspective, very simple. Everybody understands this is using AI, IoT, etc., in order to improve our manufacturing, right? Create a more efficient, more flexible approach. But then how do you get started? How do you actually start doing this in smart manufacturing? My advice, my guidance is start with thinking about what we're going to actually do. Just like any other problem, really understand what are we trying to achieve. Make sure it's aligned with the company strategy, right? So manufacturing has its own strategy. What are we addressing? What are we trying to actually address with that? And then make sure that you've actually put all the resources there so that we will be able to execute on this AI problem. And of course, absolutely important to make sure that you're looking at the ethical side, the compliance side. And the good news is that Gen AI and agents and AI itself actually are conducive to understanding what those compliance documents are telling us. What are the laws? What are the regulations? How do we actually make sure that we stay compliant with those things? How do we create the ethical foundations so that we do the right thing? So plan, execute, and make sure that there is responsible implementation underneath. Now, if I dive a little deeper into what it means for smart manufacturing, if we start from the top right-hand side, what I have done typically is even before you start getting data from the manufacturing line, what you can do is you can understand what that data is and use generative AI to actually create that synthetic data. We can actually even almost create a digital twin with that synthetic data long before you've actually started applying AI to the smart manufacturing. What we have also done is, of course, by the way, any of these steps can be applied before or after. You don't have to do all of these. You don't have to do one of these. You can pick the ones that make sense for you. So today we are applying Gen AI and AI to innovate based on what has happened in the past, understanding how those new designs should be happening. Nigel talked about predictive maintenance a couple of times, right? Absolutely. Hassan talked about defects and finding vision, using vision, etc., to find those defects. Absolutely apply all of those. One area that I found is fairly easier to actually get started with is optimizing that supply chain, actually understanding what the demand is, what the inventory is, how do you manage both of those. And then, of course, the real benefit at the end of the day with agents happens with processes. If we try and understand what are those operational parameters, how can we automate the optimization of that? How can we automate the optimization of those processes? That's how you get the real benefits of it. Going a little deeper into that, start simple, I'd say, right? So the very first one I talked about, building synthetic data sets, you don't actually need to get the data from the system. Absolutely do. Please get the data from the system because you're going to get real data when you actually get it from the system. But you don't have to wait for that. You can actually start creating this data set. You know what the data is going to be like. Of course, it's going to be clean data, so it won't be perfect, but it gives you a head start. You start modeling, you start creating those models. And the best part of creating those models is you're really beginning to create a digital twin. And once you actually start pulling in data from the real system, that digital twin can start giving you IoT data, real-time data, and evolves. So you don't have to wait for everything to be in place in order to do this. Of course, once you have started doing this and you've got a lot of that data, the next version of that product now, you can work with generative AI to actually start getting ideas. Again, remember, generative AI isn't actually really creative. It is just taking what it's already gotten and rehashing it in certain ways. But that can give you enough ideas because we as humans don't think about everything all the time. That's the big advantage of these computers. They can think about everything all the time and they can guide us as to, hey, you might be better off doing this. Have you tried that? Right? So use generative AI in the design process itself. What I found it really useful for actually is to fine tune even better than just designing from the beginning. You've already got some ideas. You've already decided how this product is going to be. And then we go to multiple AI agents and LLMs and ask, how would I improve this? I've got these limitations. What would you do differently, right? And use that to learn. In predictive maintenance, you really have to actually watch what is happening with the system. What's the temperature like? What's the vision like? What's the sound? What's changing, right? Vibrations, all of these things. How do you measure those? And then how do you train your agents? This is AI, so you can actually train it to understand here's what's normal, here's what an anomaly is. And if an anomaly happens, if the anomaly is a certain level, here's the action you can take. By the way, always build a human in the loop so that if the AI agent has to take a decision that's a really difficult decision or could cause really far-reaching implications, at least it calls somebody, it wakes up somebody in the middle of the night, and the human looks at it and takes that final decision. But what this allows you to do is to actually have that maintenance done in time if you've actually got the inputs coming in. You don't have to do it at the last minute. You can plan it beforehand. We talked a little bit about supply chains, right? Supply chains today, we have inventory. We do this by hand. We do it with Excel spreadsheets. We do it with BI tools, etc. We understand the patterns of usage and the inventory stock over time. We try and monitor and predict what those supply chains should look like. What these Gen AI and AI tools and agents actually can do for us is they can continuously do that behind the scenes as things are happening on the shop floor. They can actually continue to monitor it. The human still stays in the loop, but what you can then do is things like, we asked that question, Nigel, you asked about reducing the cost parts of it. One of the costs in manufacturing is inventory. How do you keep that inventory level to the ideal level, not too small, not too big? And we've done this intuitively with Excel spreadsheets, etc., behind the scenes. Now these agents can keep an eye on that and see what it actually should be and plan beforehand. Process optimization, I think, is where we're going to see the biggest improvements with agents, especially. Machine learning can really understand these past patterns, and it's not necessarily just the agents. What I think is going to happen, and what I'm already beginning to see, is that these agents, Gen AI, etc., they apply to certain parts of the problems that we are trying to solve. What actually happens is you still have to apply machine learning for certain other parts, really understanding what has happened behind the scenes, and then use the LLM, etc., for a human to talk to it, use the agents to do some of these things automatically, but use the machine learning to actually understand what should happen. The reasoning, basic reasoning happens today. In the future, reasoning is going to get even better. But responsible AI principles, it's the human who needs to make sure that the responsible AI principles are there from day one, and that the human is always there in the loop, at least at the beginning levels of these AI agents and automation, process automation. Maybe down the road when things become much more sophisticated and we've had a lot of experience with these, we can let the machines do a lot of these things automatically. In the beginning, absolutely need to make sure that the human is there. So summarizing, what does this actually mean? If in the smart manufacturing space, we make strategic AI investments, we can get our supply chain resilient. We can take decisions in this manufacturing space that are AI informed. We can scale them properly. And the bottom line is we can actually get back to making innovation happen in production. We can increase the efficiency, but we can also increase the production levels. The challenge really is not just the AI adoption. AI adoption is a challenge. But one of the big challenges that is going to come is the maturity of the technologies, the maturity of the teams, the maturity of even the humans. How do we embed that AI sustainably? How do we embed that AI responsibly? And last but not the least, we mentioned this a couple of times at the panel, that AI, I believe, is a cultural problem as much as it's a technology problem and a data problem. And the one part of the team that can actually make that difference is the people. So how can we make sure that the people have the data literacy, the community understands how AI works, the community, the people who are actually using these supply chains, the people who are actually on that smart manufacturing floor understand how to use it, and how do we do it together? Thank you very much. This is KK, and I'll hand back to Nigel.
Thanks, KK. We have a few minutes left, so let's pick up for one or two audience questions. Feel free to keep them coming in. If we don't get to them now, we'll follow up with our speakers after the session. So let's go to some of the Q&As as such. Let's go through these. Here we go. From Emma, how do you handle data quality challenges when legacy systems are still part of the architecture? Should we go to one of you? Do you want who wants to pick that up? Quite happy just to let you roll with the panel.
Since I still have the mic, I can
Yes.
I can start off. And
sorry,
Praveen, I see your hand up.
Yeah.
But the way I've handled it, Emma, is so data quality, first of all, fundamental to that data foundation step that we were talking about. Data quality is critical. You absolutely really need to start with that. What we have seen works for us is two things. There are a lot of frameworks today that allow you, things like Great Expectations, et cetera, open source frameworks, and companies who actually work in this space, who you can actually work with to begin with to start improving that data quality. You can't, what I found is, in my experience, you can't always keep going back to those things to make sure that the data quality is good. What I found is teaching the human so that the data quality errors come in because either the data isn't complete or the wrong thing was entered at some point. And then using AI right at that point, the source where you're actually creating this data, to check and say, oh, this doesn't look right. Maybe I can ask the human, are you sure this is what you want actually to be here? Because we've already seen that beforehand. So I believe there's a lot to come. There are tools that you can use today, but there's a lot of human involvement at this point. In the future, it's going to become a lot more automated, I think. Praveen, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, nicely answered. Yeah. So Emma, how would I handle the data quality issue in my organization if I have? Start with creating a data catalog, if possible, right? To identify where or what kind of data we have in which areas of businesses, right? And if possible, can we establish data governance framework or the data governance role itself? That will help a lot. And also I will go one step further, so the data quality is also depends upon the quality of the business process, how well it is established and well defined in the organization. So data where at occurrence and where the data is being captured, right? How well those processes are defined and how well people who are filling those information data are trained or educated. So data catalog probably can help you in solving your problem partially, may not 100%, but it will still help you in terms of at least knowing out that where the data is laying, that I would say data footprints in your organization. That's the first step. Then you will start improving later on.
Fantastic. Okay, we've got another question from Mohanan. How do you see the support model within a bigger organization once a model is developed and deployed? Who wants to take that question from the panel? Girish, do you want to have a crack at that? Yes.
Hassan, I think you came off. You can go first, please.
Yeah.
No, go really quickly. All right, Girish. This is a bigger problem than creating a model, in my opinion.
Right.
When you let your models loose in the real world, first that is when they are really tested. So you need to keep check of the context in which your model was developed, and you have to make sure that it works in it is let loose in that particular way. But then there are many different ways in terms of machine learning operations, where you can keep an eye out on what the model is doing, who's using it, how they're using it, is it being abused or not. So there's a whole world of machine learning operations which can be deployed in this particular area. Jirish.
It's look, I mean, firstly, I mean, I think there are two I mean, the model, I'm using another word of a model, like the operating model, which most companies would go for, right? So you've got the industry LLM providers, if I may simplistically put it, right, who are giving you either a product like a OpenAPI or, OpenAI or, Anthropic, etc. And then there are others like the Metas of the world and Llamas, where they are allowing you to build on top of it. Now, the first strategic choice as an organization you need to make is, do you have the skills and capability to start building on top, or are you happy with a commoditized, if I may say, product? Because then at least the onus of who supports it in any shape and form, you already have a service provider who is actually built it. For example, Microsoft say is offering its own Bing Chat equivalent Copilot, all fundamentally built upon the OpenAI ecosystem. So you rather have them engage and support you, because at this stage of maturity, probably 0.001% would really have that. Now, if you do choose to say, no, I'm going to go and actually build on top of a Llama, a cloud, etc., that needs a very different level of skill, sophistication, investment, and where it might be justified, maybe in, Hassan, like in your space, pharma, life science, etc., where it's got so many regulatory, legal, other implications surrounding it that you almost need a very strong technical skill pool as the model is even being evolved and abstracted and developed, because the implications of giving it a black box in a pharma, in a life science, in a regulatory environment can be far worse than the benefits of innovation from it. Yeah. So just two very simple models to begin with itself is whether you go for a commoditized product base or you want to build on top of something. I think those two simple starting points are strategic choices. Perhaps then start defining what you call as a support model, and of course we can have an endless conversation on that. So, but that's probably the way to think about it.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Well, we're sort of running out of time now. It's coming up to 16:31. Thanks once again to all our speakers and everyone who's joined us live. We hope you've walked away with a few new ideas and maybe even a bit of clarity about where to start or what to scale next. If you'd like to learn more, please reach out to the CXO Circle. Just to let you know, there are two events coming up. The Smart Manufacturing Forum 2025 on Thursday, November the 27th, and also the AI Data and Security Summit on Thursday, November the 27th as well. Basically, tickets at the moment until the end of May are around 50% off. So please reach out to the CXO Circle to get your tickets early, make a big saving, and look forward to a great event coming up. So thank you everyone today, and I really appreciate your time, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. Cheers.
And thanks
Thank
everyone.
you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.